Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. First of all, thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time. I want to let you know that this webinar is recorded, and so I'll be sharing the webinar with everyone afterwards. Hopefully, for those who are in Europe, this time zone works a little bit better for you. And so if you do like that, send us feedback because we're always interested in knowing that. My name is Hai Nguyen. I'm co-founder of Affluence, the company behind Matrix. Today's goals, what I want to do is I want to make sure that you get a good understanding of Matrix, help you become more effective and efficient at prioritizing tasks, projects, and emails, help you envision what your work and life success may look like with Matrix, and then how to use Matrix to achieve your goals. This is an introduction to Matrix, and actually I'll be focusing on the beginner's aspect of it. So I'm going to make the assumption that you have really little understanding of what Matrix is and why it's used. And one of the things that I want to address too is that everyone who's here today and everyone who's listening to this webinar afterwards, you all have a lot of goals that you want to achieve. And typically, you are very driven to achieve what it is that you want to achieve. Therefore, I want you to reflect on the webinar itself. And then as you walk away from today's presentation, think about how you can implement this right away. Hopefully, you'll get some insight immediately after the webinar. And so if that does happen, let us know. We're always interested in learning more. The other thing I do want to mention is that there is a chat section that you can send messages or questions or any comments. I'm more than happy to answer them right after my product presentation and my demo, because I want to make sure that this is a great opportunity for you to ask any questions that's pertinent to your needs. So why do you even prioritize? That's a good question. Sometimes I've talked to customers and there are those who actually need to prioritize and there are those who don't. And there's three reasons that customer comes to Matrix. The first is to be better at keeping track on the status of work when you have a lot of things on your plate. And then the second is to create alignment across team members so that everyone knows what's important. And then the third is to take control of emails and meetings. Ironically, one of the things that I feel has been extremely challenging over the last couple of years is that despite having more software than ever before to prioritize our work and to collaborate and to communicate, I feel like we're actually getting more overwhelmed than ever before, because now, you're getting messages by email, you're getting messages by text, you're getting messages by your project management platform, you're getting, messages in Microsoft Teams and all that. So we're creating all these sources of data, all these sources of information and assignment and so forth, and it's becoming more and more difficult to be on top of that. So what's really interesting is what happens if you don't prioritize. So one of the things that I want to communicate is the importance of prioritization, but also the consequences of not prioritizing. And the first is that you lose sight of what's important and you end up working on the wrong things. One of the takeaways I want to provide is that it's actually worse to actually work on the wrong things and doing a really good job of it than not working on it at all. Imagine how many times, just think about your own personal experience, how many times you spent so much effort and time working on either an amazing report or a product launch or something like that, and then it's crickets afterwards. It's not consumed, it's not used. And that's what's happened, is that if we are using our resources in the wrong way, it's actually far more demoralizing. And then the second aspect of not prioritizing is that you end up feeling really busy, but you're not meeting your goals. And those are two different things. You can be, riding the hamster wheel and working continuously, but at the same time, it is not driving the needs of your own personal goals or the goals of your organization. And then thirdly, you're completely overwhelmed by emails and meetings. I get a couple hundred emails per day, so I have a lot of emails. And what happens is that if I go and I spend all my time on emails and I work on the wrong emails, I easily will become overwhelmed. That's what I can do the entire day. But instead, I have to think about what are the things that I'm trying to achieve? What are the emails that's most important that I have to respond to at any moment in time? And so when you don't prioritize, these are the challenges that happens over and over again. And so, as we walk away from today's webinar, I want you to think, what happens if you don't use Matrix? Stick with the status quo. There's a reason why you're here today. What brought you here? And then what happens if you do nothing about it? So keep that in the back of your mind, okay? So what is Matrix? Matrix is a comprehensive email, priority, and project management software all in one. And it helps at 3 different levels. At the individual level, which is absolutely the most important, it helps you prioritize your tasks and emails. That's pretty much it. You can think of Matrix as a fancy to-do list that you probably use, you've used so many different software for that. But what happens is Matrix is particularly focused on prioritization and help you focus on exactly what needs to be done at any moment in time. So at the individual level, it helps you have sanity, for lack of better words, and ensure that you work on the right things. And one thing I want to emphasize is that Matrix was created more than a decade ago, and the individual was the core of the product from the get-go. And so my argument is that if it's successful for you at the individual level, everything else will fall into place. So I want to make sure that you think about how Matrix will help you in particular. At the team level, Matrix help you be aligned on key projects. So one of the things I like to think about is imagine if you have clarity on understanding what your priorities are, and then suddenly all your team members and all your coworkers are actually on the same plane, as in they also understand what their priorities are. Now, when you actually work together, how much more powerful is that? And then lastly, we help organization create a single source of truth to become more efficient and more effective. So I explain how you can help team members be aligned at any point in time, but at the organizational level, Matrix actually gives you a clear understanding of the shifting climate on your priorities. So what happens is a year from now, you can still look back and see what your priorities were in the past, what changes have been made. So what that allows you to do is actually have a consistency across time. So what makes Matrix better than other software is that it's the only software that's Microsoft 365 security certified across the Microsoft Teams app, the Outlook app, as well as the web app. We're actually leveraging AI more and more to help you achieve your goals. And some of those areas that's already released in the product is actually useful, but at the same time, we have so many more things that's coming out. And then thirdly, we provide what I call people-centric collaboration. And I find this to be very important. This is actually one of my favorite features in Matrix, which is it helps me understand what I need to do for any person, any particular person on my team. And so instead of actually looking at from a project-centric standpoint, when you think about prioritization, you can also look at it from the perspective of people. What are the things that's high priority for this person? And then lastly, Matrix is available as a standard SaaS solution, but we also have a HIPAA compliant solution for healthcare and life sciences, and then Azure Government Cloud solution for state and local government, as well as managed private Azure deployments. And so if any of these other solutions, enterprise solution interests you, feel free to reach out to us and we'd be happy to discuss that. So what makes Matrix effective is it helps you understand what needs to be done now, what needs to be done later, and what are the things you delegate. And then finally, have a clear understanding that priorities are constantly shifting and that Matrix offer the one place everyone can go to know what needs to be done. And this last aspect of it is the ultimate goal, right? Imagine, again, where you are today. Do you know exactly what it is you need to be done, that you need to work on? And then second, do you know what your coworkers are working on? And then do you know what their managers and their team members are working on? And then if you do have disagreements, is there one central place where you can go to actually get alignment? And that's the goal of Matrix. Matrix is a software that pretty much helps the entire organization have one central place to see the goals and priorities for this particular project, the goals and priorities for this particular initiative, as well as for the organization. Now, I do want to mention real quick that there are so many different software that serve so many different purposes. Matrix doesn't necessarily replace your customer relationship management software. It doesn't necessarily replace your goal management, your high-level goal management software. It's intended to be the one place for you to prioritize your task and have clarity on that so that you know what to work on. So when you start comparing Matrix to your workflow and all that, just keep that in your mind, in the back of your mind. Let's talk about the fundamental behind Matrix. So there's a famous quote attributed to former President Eisenhower: "What is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important." Now, what I really like about this quote is it helps us understand the dimensions of the things that we have to do. Instead of actually looking at a to-do list, what happens is you look at every single task, every single action item that you have, and ask the question, is this important and is this urgent, right? And so when you have a to-do list, what do you decide to work on? Do you start at the top or do you start at the bottom? Or do you start somewhere random in the middle? And then if you have to add tasks to it, do you add it to the top of the list or to the bottom of the list? Or again, somewhere in the middle? So instead, if we look at the dimensions of importance and urgency, then it becomes a little bit more obvious. The things that are important and urgent are the things that we should do now, right? That's where we should be focusing our time, because those are the fires we have to fight. And then the things that are important but not urgent, those are in the plan quadrant. So those are the things we should start thinking about and work on. And then those that are urgent but not necessarily important, maybe those are something that we can delegate to others, or maybe there's resources out there that can do a better job than us. And then finally, instead of ever capturing anything that's not important, not urgent, you have an inbox to actually be sort of a place for you to take everything that's in your brain and put it down in something tangible. And this is the essence of Matrix, by the way. All we do is we take the stuff that you have to do, instead of, again, putting in long list where you don't have clarity on what it is you need to work on, and instead force you to organize it into these quadrants and make it a lot easier to understand what it is that you need to work on. So here's an exercise I'd like you to try. Take out a piece of paper that you have right now and start writing down the things that you have to do that are important and urgent, important, not urgent, etc., exactly in the format I have here. And then ask your coworkers to do the same. In particular, ask your direct manager to do the same, and ask your direct reports to do the same. And then start comparing notes and say, hey, by the way, these are the things I consider to be high priorities. What do you think? And what happens is that when you have a conversation and you don't have anything that's tangible or written down, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we agree, that sounds great. But what happens is, you actually put on a piece of paper, you realize, wait a minute, then look at all these discrepancies that we have. Look at all these disagreements that we didn't know we had. And so one thing that's really interesting is that 4 quadrants Eisenhower matrix, as I showed you, creates alignment because it forces you to prioritize from the beginning. And by the way, that's the hardest part about using Matrix. When you use Matrix, we don't let you put a task into a long list without deciding what quadrant it goes in, right? And because of that, you're spending so much more time thinking about, okay, where does this truly belong? And that's the point. If you find it hard, that's hard for a reason. You cannot have everything in important and urgent. If everything's important and urgent, then nothing is. But if you have to think about where it is that you're going to spend your time, that's when you want to spend a lot more time thinking about, what should I work on, as opposed to just working on things for the sake of working on things. And one thing that's not so obvious is success from using Matrix software isn't about finding what everyone agrees on, but it's also discovering disagreements on what should be a priority when it isn't. As I mentioned earlier, the worst thing you could do, one of the worst things you could do, is spending an extraordinary amount of time doing a fantastic job working on the wrong things. And so if you discover that disagreement, you can actually start prioritizing your resources to work on the right things. I do want to mention that there's also other resources available. And so we have actually webinar recordings that we post every single time. And so we have additional introduction to Matrix, email management masterclass, templates and events topics, and all that. And so the other thing I also want to mention is that as we do other webinars, other topics, we will also post them. But if you have anything that is particular of interest to you, various use cases or whatever, reach out to us and we'd be happy to see if that's a topic that we can address. With that, I'm going to go jump into the product itself. So now you can see what the product looks like. And then my goal is to show you how to get started right away. So then when you walk away from today's webinar, you can open up Matrix and start doing the things that I'm showing you, okay? All right, so now I have my Matrix open. And so as you can see, I want to walk you through the structure of Matrix, since I'm assuming that a lot of you are relatively new to the software. So Matrix is no different from any other task or project management software if you look at it at a high level. On the left-hand side, you have your list of projects. So projects might be something like, my personal to-do list, right? My personal priorities, my team priority list, or it might be an initiative that I'm working on. And so for me, I actually have a project, for example, for my goals for 2024, or I might have, customers interactions that are actually very important, or I have projects that are related to the various software that our company produces. So when you start Matrix, there's a couple of projects that I generally recommend that you go and create right away. I would recommend that you create a project called My Personal Priorities. And so when you do that, then you can actually start tracking the things that you deem to be important, and just, again, to have some sanity. And if you did nothing else, it's just a great place to actually jot down the things that matter to you. So here I have that project selected, My Personal Priorities. And when you have that project open, in the middle is the 4 quadrant, and that's the most important aspect of Matrix. And as you can see, when you create task in here, you don't put it in the list, you decide what quadrant it goes in. So let me give you an example. Let's just say one of the things I want to do is I want to say follow up with webinar participants. Okay, and so that's a task that I want to do today. And then I'm going to say due 2 p.m. So what happens is when I do something like this and I click add, Matrix create the task for me, but at the same time, we use natural language to understand that it's due 2 p.m. and so therefore we set the due date for you. So now I have a task that's created in my personal priority list that's due at 2 p.m. When 2 p.m. comes at my local time, it's going to send me a notification if I didn't get it done yet. But one of the things I can do around this task is when I've created it and I select it, the right-hand side opens up, and this is called the item details. And so if you've used task management software before, you know that in the item details, you can add all sorts of metadata, such as, again, due dates or also other information. Well, Matrix lets you do those and a couple of other things that I think are important. First, there's something called starring. So if you star a task, what happens is it gets this little icon on it and it pops to the top of the list. So what I like to do is when I have a project and I have, 5 tasks, 10 tasks, it's not a big deal. I don't have to star any. But if I have 25 or 30 tasks, then I want to understand which one are most important to me. And so I would star them, and now it pops to the top of my list. And those are usually my active tasks. And then below that, I have icons. If I click on icon, I can choose an icon that represents this particular task. And then below that, I have owner. So who's responsible for this task? Now, since it's a personal project, maybe I'm the only owner. No one else has to be involved. And then next to it, I have progress, effort, reminders, and due dates. Reminders and due dates, in my opinion, are the 2 most important metadata you have to set for every single task. And I can't emphasize that enough. If we talk about importance and urgency, well, you understand what something is important, but then the second part is urgency. So if you want to track urgency, you need the dimensions of time. Therefore, if you want to work on something and you really want to make sure that you get it done, set due date. Now, what's the difference in due dates and reminders? Imagine if you have to work on something and it's due in 2 months and it's going to take you a week to work on, and you set the due date 2 months from now. Great. 2 months from now, guess what? On that day, you realize, wait a minute, how am I going to get this done if it's going to take me a week's worth of work? So what you want to do is you want to set reminders ahead of time to go and actually remind you to actually get started ahead of time. Now, the other reason why you use reminders is it's a way to trick your brain. Let me give you an example. When you started your day this morning, and you check your emails, what happened? You probably looked at the last email that came in, and you look at that first, and you usually respond to that first, right? Was that the most important email? Probably not, right? And it's the same thing with tasks. It's the same thing with anything that you're assigned to. Your brain always tends to look at the last thing in as the first thing out. And that's just the nature of how these urgent tasks pull us away from what's truly important. So by using reminders, what happens is that we actually bring it to the top of our attention over and over again so that our brain realizes, wait a minute, I need to work on this. So if you have something that's truly important, one of the things I like to do is I would set a due date like that, and I would say, remind me daily. So now on a daily basis, I will get a reminder from Matrix to work on this particular task. This is so crucial because the due date itself is not sufficient. The reminders is what will ensure that we actually work on the right things. So if you walk away from Matrix today and you use only a few features, these are the 2 things that I want you to set on every single one of your tasks. So when you create a task, set that due date and set those reminders, especially for anything that's important. And as you can see, I actually typed the reminders here in the chat in Matrix. there's a little green text that pops up. Again, we use natural language to actually set that due date for you. So as an example, when I follow up with customers, for example, I always do something like due in 1 month, and then I would say remind me monthly. And then if I happen to miss it and the due date passes, Matrix will send me those reminders, and I realize, wait a minute, I didn't get this done. Let me open up the task. I can change the due date as needed, or I actually mark it as done. So I highly, highly recommend that. And again, make sure you use that feature. Now below that, you have the chat section. You saw how I say use this place to actually type in comments. But in a team environment, the chat section is very useful because now you can actually communicate with each other. So you might have multiple team members chiming on the same thing and saying, hey, what's the status of this? And then someone else might respond with information around it. It also serves as a history, a record of all the changes you have in Matrix for this particular task. And then you have the notes section where you can add subtasks, you can add bullets and basic information. It is not intended to be rich text. If you want rich text, that's what your Microsoft Word or that's what your Google Docs are for. And then finally, you have the resources section, which is where you can attach files, documents, links, images, emails to any particular task. And that's all part of organization. So one of the things I have, so I have in my real work account, I have something like 300 plus projects and more than 10,000 tasks. And if you think about that, that sounds probably overwhelming to you, but the nice thing about Matrix is actually, I don't feel overwhelmed because it's so organized. And part of that organization is actually having all my emails related to one task be together in one central place, right? So the challenge all of us face is we have so many different data sources. Again, your manager might be sending you an email. You might talk to a coworker, in the hallway and come up with a task. And now you have all these places and you're trying to keep track and juggle all of these things at the same time. So Matrix in the resources section allow me to pull a lot of those things together to one central place. I might have emails, presentations, PowerPoints, all related to a customer in one central place. And now I don't have to worry about hunting for it when I need to look at that information. And I will show you how to prioritize email shortly. So that's in essence is what a task is. And as you can see, I don't have to set much information. Again, I want you to remember when you create a task, set that due date, and it'll be so easy for you to follow up on it. Now, I created that task in quadrant 4 here, but let's just say if this is something that's truly important, urgent, I just drag and drop it, and now I can put it in a different quadrant. And as you can see, it is very visual. So when I start my day and I look at this particular project, I can see, okay, let me look at the quadrant 1 first, right? What are the things I have to work on? And then afterward, the quadrant 2. And then essentially organize all of this information into these quadrants. And here's the beauty. In a team environment, let's just say if I switch to another project here, in a team environment where I might have multiple coworkers working together with me, when we all go to this project, we can all be on the same page. And the idea is that when I asked you earlier to, do the exercise of taking a piece of paper, write down the tasks that you have, and then walk around the office and compare notes, well, this is it. This is the digital version of that. So when you have the team priority project, your manager can go in here and see, okay, what are all the priorities that we have? Who's assigned to what? When are they due? When do we have reminders? And then if you're a manager and you have your direct reports, you go to this project and you see, hey, who is working on what? What are they working on? What project's behind? What are the reminders that's in place? Are we actually going to get this done? And that's what this is all about. It's one central place where you can be synced asynchronously. You don't have to have a meeting to actually be aligned. And not only that, it is so visual because, the problem with the list is you look at that list and you're completely overwhelmed. You don't know what's important. It doesn't stand out. It's not very visual. So with the matrix system, it is so easy to spot the fires to do now. And again, if you see that something should belong in the quadrant 1 but is not, then you can just drag and drop it. And then you see something that's in quadrant 1 but shouldn't be, you can move it to somewhere else. And then your team members might disagree, but that's when you have those meetings. That's when you have those conversations inside Matrix and outside of Matrix. So then you can get to that alignment. So, I mean, this is basic management stuff, but it is so crazy that, the vast majority of our organizations do not leverage something like this just to have alignment. If you use Matrix and you create a team priority project, start putting down the information, start assigning the task to people. And when you have your meeting, project it on the big screen, and you will see how much more quickly you'll come to alignment. So I do want to encourage you to do that, because I've seen amazing successes from our customers just by projecting Matrix onto the big screen and discussing the thing that are actually important to your work. Now, as you can see, when I selected this project and I don't have a particular task selected, the right-hand side showed me what's called the project details. So of course, the project might have a project name, but one of the things about Matrix is that you can actually customize the project itself. So what that means is I can decide which team member should be in this project, right? I can click on this plus, I can invite additional team members as needed. So maybe my team, one project might have 3 people, one project might have 5, one project might have 10, and one project might just be for myself. Matrix gives you that infinite flexibility. And then below that, you actually have the quadrant. So earlier you saw how I have do now, but in this particular case, I can actually change the name of the quadrant too. So sometimes some organizations prefer to use P0 for high priority, P1, P2, P3, right? Or some other organization might actually not have quadrant 3 as delegate, and instead you call it files and resources. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if I want to create a project for tracking a particular client, and I'm an architecture company. Well, what I can do is I can create a project in Matrix, and now I call it architecture project for client A. And instead of actually having do now, do later, the Eisenhower Matrix, I customize this to say high priority task, plan task, information and resources, and required attention. And so Matrix gives you this infinite flexibility in terms of customization specific to your needs for every single project. And then afterwards, you can actually click on this and change the color. I like the color coding just for organizational purposes. So for example, maybe external projects, you might have one color, or engineering project, you might have another color, or personal project, you might have another color. And the whole idea is that if you have a lot of projects, you want it to be visual. And so that's what the color coding is for. Now, here's the cool part. Let's just say, as you use Matrix, you start creating all these different projects with different quadrant names, right? Matrix let you save that as a template. So then when you launch new projects, you can actually use that template instead of the Eisenhower Matrix. So if you click on this top right here, you can say save project as template. And now we save that, that information. So when you launch a new project, choose from one of those. The next amazing thing about this is that if you have tasks inside those projects, you can actually save those tasks as part of your template too. Let me give you an example. Let's just say if you're in HR and you want to do employee onboarding using Matrix, you can create a project one time in Matrix with all the tasks that your new employees will have to do, such as training, documents, or whatever. Save that as a template. And now the next time you have a new employee, instead of creating all those tasks over and over again, you actually just launch a Matrix project and everything's created for you. All the due dates get propagated for you from the start date. So that's an advanced use case of Matrix, but I want to bring that up because sometimes it's extremely valuable and it saves you so much time from having to recreate work. And our whole goal, by the way, is to help you become more effective and more efficient. So duplicating things over and over again does not sound efficient to me. So as you can see, I have a project here. I have various different types of projects. Let me show you how to create a project. So creating a project is pretty straightforward. On the left-hand side here is my menu, right? And so this is where I can access other information and views in Matrix outside of these quadrant view. One of that is actually plus project here, which allows me to create a project. When I click on that, I have a couple of options to create project. I can always choose a blank project. A blank project uses the Eisenhower Matrix as the default. So for example, when you start using Matrix for the very first time after this call, you would go in here and create a project and call it my personal priority, right? So you could do something like that. Okay, so that's what I would recommend that you do. And then afterwards, you can leave it as a template and you can choose a color and you click add project. And that's pretty much it. That's how you create a project, a basic project in Matrix. But at the same time, I can actually choose from what's called public templates. So because the quadrants are customizable and because there's so many different ways to use the quadrants, Matrix gives you a ton of different ways to use Matrix templates with various customized names and so forth, some best practices that we've seen. If you've gone or seen any business school related methodology, you've seen so many 4 quadrants that they use, right? Everything from SWOT analysis for strategic management and so forth. So we actually have those templates for you as well. So what's nice about that is now you can learn and get best practices that's been around for a long time. So that's in public templates. And if this is a small list of our public templates, we actually have hundreds of project templates. I think maybe even 1,000 of different types of templates and guides on how to use them. The other thing you can do is you can actually choose from your existing templates. As I mentioned earlier, if you have recurring projects, you can actually choose one of those, or sometimes you have your own naming convention. So again, for me personally, I like using the fires in the quadrant 1 just to help me understand, hey, this is where I need to focus on my time. And what happens is that fire quadrant should be empty. So instead of actually having quadrant 1 be always full, I want that to be empty because that means I'm not firefighting. I'm actually planning my day accordingly. So again, these are best practices that you'll gain over time as you use Party Matrix. You don't have to worry about that at this moment. And then lastly, you have the option to create a project using AI. So what happens with Party Matrix is that we are leveraging AI to help you meet your goals. So imagine if you go in here and you say, you know what, one of my goals this year is to be promoted to senior project manager, right? You type that here, get promoted to senior project manager. And then you click create, and Party Matrix will actually go and build out a series of action items that we think might be helpful to help you achieve that goal. Your goal might be improve my operational efficiency. My goal might be to go and acquire more customers or improve my marketing or improve my website. These are all the things that you can do and type in here, and our system will try its best to actually give you some guidelines. And from there, you can pick and choose what task is actually important. So that's how you create projects in Party Matrix. So now I'm going to go back to this view here. And as you can see, I have my list of projects. Now, earlier we talked about due dates and reminders, and I said how Party Matrix will send you reminders. Well, what happens is when you start Party Matrix, you start in what's called the home view. So instead of actually opening in projects, the home view gives you an overview of everything that requires your attention. And this is what's called alerts. So as you can see, I have 53 alerts here. So what that means is these are tasks that require my attention, right? And so, for example, I have an item that's due, I have an item that's overdue, I have a reminder that's come up, or someone assigned me a task, etc. So on a daily basis, I do get a lot of alerts. I get dozens of alerts, actually sometimes hundreds of alerts. And so it does get overwhelming. But what happens is here, I can go to this button and clear notifications or clear notifications for finished items, etc., just to have a clean slate. So when my day is done, I can go in here and clear out everything that's needed. But when you have those reminders for important tasks, that's when they pop up over and over again. And so when you have something that, again, let's just say, you know, on a very, very important email you need to respond to, you said due in 1 month. Just think about how you would handle that today for a second. Okay, you get a very important email. You cannot respond to it at this moment, but it's due in 1 month. How would you do it? Well, with Party Matrix, you can actually take that email, convert it to a task, set the due date for 1 month. Okay, now that's great. In 1 month, you get a reminder or you get a notification that says, hey, this item is due. But then for some reason, you forget about it because, you know, you have a lot of things going on. Imagine if you just use your email software right now and you set that reminders. I'm sorry, you set that due date, and then the month passes and you didn't get around to it, it will be completely lost. So now you suddenly have an important email that was never responded to, and you've probably seen this so many times before. Someone will respond to you and said, oh man, I totally forgot. It got lost in my inbox, right? That happens over and over again. Well, Party Matrix will take away that excuse because you can actually go set that due date and then set that recurring reminder. So now on a daily basis or weekly basis, it will keep on popping up here in the alerts view. So for me, again, as I mentioned, I have emails that sometimes I want to follow up in a year. I would set a due date in a year, and then I would set yearly reminders, or I can, you know, set reminders in 11 months or something like that. So that just helps me get to that email and respond to it. Okay, so I do recommend clearing these notifications once in a while if you feel overwhelmed. You have a lot of things going on. But this is where you start your day, and then from there, you can jump to any particular project. The other thing you can do in Matrix is actually you can look at all the other dimensions as well. So for example, you can click on agenda. What agenda does is it tells you what you should work on today and what are the things that are overdue. So all those tasks that I mentioned where you've created, your due dates and so forth, it will show up here. And now it's a time-centric way for you to see what it is you need to work on. And then you can also go to My Items. And My Items are essentially all the tasks that you have across all of your projects. It is very, very useful because, as I mentioned, for me, I have several hundred projects. And so therefore, I don't want to click through every project just to see my task. And then I'll probably see other people's tasks too. So when I go to My Items, I can see the things that I have to do. Again, the star items are very easy for me to spot. And then not only that, I can actually filter by items that I own or items that I follow that I care about. And I can actually print out this list. I can actually select these items in groups, or I can add items directly from here. So one of the goals that we have with Matrix is always make it easy for you to create tasks no matter where you are, right? So let me give you an example. Let's talk about emails. Let's just say you get an email that comes in. And now I open Outlook. So this is not Matrix. I have Outlook open, and this is Outlook for web, but you could be on the Outlook for desktop. It doesn't really matter. And you have an email, right? Maybe, again, it's an email to request for a quote or something like that. Well, Matrix is fully integrated into the Microsoft ecosystem. So you just have to install our application. If you go to this apps here, you can click on that. Let me reload here. You can click on apps, and then what happens is that you can click on apps, and then you can choose Matrix, and we have an app called Turn Emails into Tasks. The way you add the Matrix app for Outlook is to click on Add Apps and search for Matrix. But I can click on Turn Emails into Tasks. If I click on that, two options comes up. The first is prioritize email, and the second is to open Matrix. So I'll go ahead and choose prioritize email. A Matrix panel opens up on the right-hand side. And what this allows me to do is turn any email into a task directly from Outlook. And as you can see, I can click capture email. The subject will become the task name. I can choose what project it goes in. I can choose what quadrant it goes in. I can assign this email to another person, and I can set a due date. So imagine this for a second. You're a manager, you get an email from your executive or something like that, or an external person, and that email requires you to bring in multiple team members and get them involved. And then you also can't respond to the email right now, and you need to set a due date for a week from now. That can all happen inside our Outlook integrations, because I can go and create that task, organize into the appropriate project, right? Assign it to the appropriate person, set the appropriate time, and click capture email. And so Matrix actually will automatically tie together threads. So if you have a thread from that same email, multiple people responding to it, and it's a continuation, then what happens is instead of actually clicking capture email, you can actually click on this option again, and choose open Matrix. If you have a big enough screen, you can actually pin Matrix open instead of actually opening this every single time. And so, some people have a really small screen, and therefore you don't want this because it'll take up a lot of real estate. But if you have a really wide screen, pin it, and every time you open an email, if the email has not been prioritized yet, you'll get the option to capture the email. And if the email has already been prioritized, you have the option to open the item instead. And as you can see, when I click open items, it actually opens up my Matrix, and I can actually jump to Matrix task and get all the details I need around this particular email. The other thing that happens is that I can actually also attach the email to an existing task. So let me give you an example. Let's just say if you have a client that sends you an email. Now you've converted that into a task. Now, a week later, that client sends you another email, right? But it's a follow-up, and it's in a totally different thread. Instead of actually creating a whole new item from that email, you can actually attach the email to an existing task. You can see that I can actually hover over any task and choose the option to attach. Now I can keep all this information organized into one central place. The way it works in Matrix is actually creates what's called an email file, and it stores in the system. And now your coworkers can open that email file and respond to it as needed. Okay, so that's how email management works. And for me personally, prioritizing emails is so critical because I just get a lot of emails and I just can't flag them all. If I flag them all, I just have too many flag emails. I do flag them, but I have hundreds of flag emails, and so it's very difficult. The other thing I can also do with Matrix is actually I can forward any emails into Matrix as well. So if you don't use Outlook and use Gmail, guess what? We actually have integrations for that too. So we have Matrix for Gmail, but at the same time, I can actually add the Matrix inbox address to my email. So then I can actually forward any email that I get, or I can actually create a task via email. Let me give you an example. On my phone, when I'm out and about and I get an email, I use Apple Mail, and therefore I don't have the Outlook integrations on my phone. So if I get an email that's important, I literally click forward, I put inbox, and then it actually sends it to my inbox address. And I would say in the body, due tomorrow, remind me daily. And now I will get a reminder tomorrow to look at this email. And when I go back to my office, when I look at my computer again, and then I'll get a constant reminders on it. It is so useful. And let me show you how to get that inbox address. If you go back to Matrix, you can go to this inbox here, and then you can actually click on secret inbox and get a special email address just for you, that if it's sent to that address, it will come up and create a task here inside your inbox. Now, what is the inbox? Inbox, essentially, you can think of tasks that don't belong in any specific projects. This is the one time you're allowed to create a task and you don't have to prioritize the quadrants because there are no quadrants associated with it. So what do I use the inbox for? I use it to track tasks that don't need to be organized. I mean, let's just say it doesn't belong in any specific project, so therefore I don't have to create a project just to track a task. And sometimes I get an email about some promotion or something like that. Then I just forward it into Matrix and it goes here. I can still assign this to other people directly from the inbox, and it'll show up in their inbox. So it's just a nice way to organize information that don't need to be organized, for lack of better words. The other thing you can also do is you can use our Chrome extension or Edge extension to create tasks from any websites that you're browsing. And again, you can send that into your inbox. And once it's into your inbox, you can actually move it to a project using this top menu right here. Okay, let's recap for a second. One, you have your list of projects. And if you're using Matrix for the very first time, I recommend you create a personal priority, a team priority, goals for 2024, right? And then also, if you have a particular initiative that you need to work on, I would recommend that as well. Two, within every single project, you should have the proper quadrant names that aligns with how you think. And if you don't want to customize that, use the Eisenhower Matrix. It's proven to be extremely effective. Three, for your team projects, make sure you invite the appropriate people. When you create a task, make sure you set due dates, make sure you set reminders, right? That's the number one thing. Even if you don't use Matrix with the team, set those due dates, set those reminders. One of the things that I like to do, for example, speaking of goals for 2024, you see here when I have this project open, I'll show you, I can click on the project details here. Instead of actually, again, having do now, do later, I change it to long-term goals, short-term goals. And then when I create a task as a goal, I would set recurring reminders without a due date. So what this does is it helps me remember this particular goal that I set for this year. That's one of the reasons why we never fulfill our goals. We would have all these ambitious goals in 2024, and then after January is over, never get back to it, right? But with Matrix and with my particular setup here, I don't have to worry about it because on a monthly basis, I'll get that ping from Matrix in the alert section that says, hey, by the way, you should read this book, New Business Book Monthly, that goal that you have for 2024. And that's what the recurring reminders is all about. So you saw how I set that up. I create that task. I said, remind me monthly. So I recommend that you do the same. If you have any goals for 2024, set the system up, set those recurring reminders. I think you'll find that useful. Now, there's a couple of other things that that Matrix does really well is what I call people-centric. So if you click on the one-on-one view here, one thing you can do is you can actually flip the entire party matrix around, and instead of thinking from a project standpoint, you think from a people standpoint. So if I go to one-on-one, I can select any coworkers I work with and see all the tasks I have in common with them. It is amazing if you are a manager and you have multiple direct reports, right? Instead of actually having to click through all your projects and see what people are working on, you go to the one-on-one, select each of the direct reports and see all the tasks each of them have. And then not only that, you can actually add share tasks directly from here. And when you do, it automatically assigns it to them, automatically invite you as followers, and you can choose what project it goes in. You can set the due dates and all of that directly from this view. So I like this a lot, especially if you have a lot of projects that's piling up, or if you have a lot of coworkers that you share tasks with across multiple projects, because it aggregates it into one central place. And this people-centric view is one of the most unique aspects of Matrix when it comes to management. So you can see here, this is the web app. You can access this web app by going to affluence.com/PM or go to Protomatrix.com. And so if you haven't installed Protomatrix yet, definitely should do that. Also, if you use the desktop app, you can also sign up for Protomatrix and get the desktop app. So that allows you to actually run Protomatrix on your Mac as well as Windows without having to go to any website. If you do use Microsoft Teams, then I highly recommend that you install Protomatrix for Teams. So simply click on apps here and install Matrix for Teams right here. We're one of the most popular apps on Teams, fully integrated into the Teams ecosystem. As you can see, once you run Matrix, you can pin it on the left-hand side here. So then you can access all of Matrix without going to the web app. The other thing you can do is you can actually integrate Matrix into your chat with coworkers as well. So for example, let's just say if you're talking to a coworker here, you can actually click on any conversation that you have and create a task directly from any Teams conversation. And then not only that, you can actually open up, you can actually install the one-on-one view here, and that allows you to see the tasks you have in common with each of your coworker directly from inside Teams. So what that means is, let's say you have 5 or 6 people that you work with all the time. You simply click on this plus icon, choose Matrix, choose one-on-one view, and that allows you to install the one-on-one with each of your coworker inside Teams. Again, all of this is intended to make it easier for you to find the information that you need to decide what to work on. Okay. And then not only that, there's a chat bot that you can actually set up by going down here and adding Matrix. What that does is it creates a chat bot that actually sends you all those notifications I mentioned to you. So again, those due dates, those reminders, right? Sometimes you might forget to open Matrix to look at your alert section. So the chat bot here will send you those notifications as needed. You don't have to use Microsoft Teams with Matrix, but if you do have Microsoft Teams, I'd strongly recommend it. Okay, with that, I think I've talked enough about Matrix, and I think I've given you enough insights on how to get started today. Let's go back to the presentation real quick. It's now up to you. Again, if you use Teams and Outlook, install our applications. They'll help you prioritize those emails. Make sure you create those three projects that I mentioned. And so hopefully, right after this webinar, you realize, okay, you know what? I need to actually help me understand what are the things I need to work on? What are the things that I want to share with my coworkers? And so you create those 3 projects, the personal priorities, the shared team priorities, and your key initiative. And then invite the appropriate team members and pitch them to them why it's important to focus on high impact tasks. As I mentioned earlier, think about what happens if you don't prioritize. If you leave it as status quo, and then the second thing is, why were you here today? Why did you sign up for this webinar? Why did you sign up for Matrix? Why do you want to look for a better way to prioritize, right? Because typically all of us struggle with prioritization and struggling with just keeping all this organized. A lot of people come to Matrix when they first get promoted because they realize, wait a minute, I'm in a whole new world and I need to understand what it is I need to work on. Or people come to Matrix when they want a promotion in order to track all the things that they have to do in order to ensure that they're actually working on the right things. So keep that in mind too. And so if you have those specific goals, remember to use our AI goal generator. And then when you create Matrix items, make sure you set those due dates and make sure you set those reminders. I can't emphasize this enough. And if you do that and you come back and you check in Matrix every few weeks or every few days, or even if you forget, it will send you the reminders every few weeks. get those things done, mark them as done if you don't get them done. And then lastly, ruthlessly prioritize. If you don't prioritize your time, someone else will. And again, the worst thing you can do is spend all your effort working on something that doesn't matter, right? So make sure you don't do that. Some advice. I generally recommend using Matrix to track high impact tasks if you're relatively new to the system. At the end of the day, Matrix is capable of handling everything. As I mentioned to you, I have hundreds of projects, tens of thousands of tasks. Matrix is able to keep all of that organized for me. I have a project for everything that I need to do. It is so powerful because it helps me stay organized. But if you're new to Matrix, you want to get started with the high impact tasks first, right? Again, the things that truly are important, the things that matter. Use Matrix as a communication tool with your manager and team members. It's actually really interesting because one of the things I think most valuable about using Matrix in general is to project it on that screen, like I mentioned to you, so that everyone can be on the same page. If you have a way to share that with everybody, it just helps create alignment so quickly. And so that's why I call it a communication tool. It ways to communicate your priorities. And then make sure you use Matrix to manage your personal goals. There's no doubt about it that your success as an individual is the most important part, right? If you're successful, everything else will fall into place. So what success with Matrix should look like? You have one central place to track all your priorities. Everyone on the team understands and are aligned on key tasks. And if you're not aligned, that's good, because then you can have a conversation about it. If you have repetitive procedures, you create those templates that I mentioned, and also check out that templates webinar if you really have a lot of templates and you want to learn how to do it. And then if you have important emails, make sure you prioritize them. And if you really have a lot of emails that you need to prioritize, check out the Email Management Masterclass. And with that, I conclude my presentation and demo. Hopefully this was helpful. I'll take a look at the chat. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer it. And then if there aren't, then also feel free to reach out to me at any point in time if you have additional questions. Question, is Matrix automatically part of Microsoft Teams? You do have to add Matrix to Microsoft Teams. So we are Microsoft M365 security certified solution. So when you open Microsoft Teams, let me see if I can show you here. When you open Matrix here, for example, you click on Add Apps and you search for Matrix. And that's where you have to add it right here. And you see how we have a little security icon here. So we're one of very few apps for that. But when you add that, there's usually a lot of organizations have Matrix already. You can install it and sign in. But sometimes they'll ask you to request IT approval, in which case they'll send IT a message. But you should typically reach out to your IT and request to be added, because IT can actually go and approve Matrix for a specific subset of users, including you, or across the whole organization. So you do have to install this separately, so it doesn't come pre-installed. Once you do have it installed, then make sure that you pin it on the left-hand side. Second question is, when you prioritize a task, it's linked to a current project. Is it possible to prioritize how important the various projects are from a strategic standpoint? That's a great question. So one of the things that I like to do is I actually also star my projects. So here, let's just say when I select a project, now I have the project details here, there's a little icon here to star. So when I star something, to me, it represents the projects that are active. So we actually have something called a starred item report. So on a weekly basis, you get an email that says, hey, these are the updates on all of your star projects or star tasks. So that's what I use the starring for. And so as you can see, when I start those projects, they pop up to the top of my list here. So you can imagine in my real account, I might have hundreds of projects down here, but I've only like 5 to 10 projects that's active at any point in time. So based on your question here, let's just say, some projects are extremely important, right? Your strategic project review, you would star, and so it's popped to the top of the list. What happens is sometimes you want to find out tasks for specific types of projects. The way it works is there's a search view. This used to be called the master view, but the search view is even more powerful because it gives you a lot of flexibility. And what happens in the search view is you can go to here and you can see, you can click on start and it shows you only the star task, right? So that's very helpful. But the other thing you can do is you can click on filter here, and then you can actually filter by star projects. So now you can find star task and star projects, or you can find all your tasks in all your star project assigned to specific people. And then afterwards, you can say this as a filter for your own needs. So in this particular case, based on what you're describing, let's just say you might have 5 or 10 projects, and then a few are starred. You can actually build one of these reports in the master list here, the search view here, to get to exactly what it is that you need, which is find me all the items assigned to me in my star projects. That's an example. That's a great question. And by the way, sometimes you actually want to find what are the items that are only in quadrant 1. And so going back to the filter here, you can actually just choose, show me all the items that are starred in quadrant 1, right? That's very, very powerful way to actually focus on those important tasks. So that's what the filter here is for. And we also have what's called frequent filters. Essentially, these are just ways for you to jump to all your items across all your projects, all your overdue items across all your projects, and then, of course, all the start items. So let me know if that answered your question. There's a couple of other ways for you to see all of your information across all projects. That's, for example, the calendar view. This is the global calendar view that shows you all the tasks you have that have due dates. But then if you also go into any specific projects, you can actually go to the top here. You can actually change views too. So what that means is I can go to the quadrant view. I can go to the list view. I can go to the calendar view. I can go to the timeline Gantt chart view. So let me show you another project, for example, that have more dates here. So here, for example, I have a project that actually have a lot more due dates. So I can actually go and see sort of like my Gantt chart here that's built automatically for me in Matrix. So if you're a project manager and you need to build a report quickly, Matrix generates all of these stuff for you automatically. Thank you for those questions. If there's any other questions, you can send them right now, or also you can reach out to us, support@affluence.com at any point in time. We're happy to address your needs. Be sure to check out my other webinars if you're interested in email management or in the template system. And then with that, I'll send out this email as a recording later today. And Matrix will send me a reminder to do that. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.